All right. Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Melanin and Moonlight. We are so glad to have you here. I am one of your co hosts, Tyrell Collins.
And I'm Vernon Scott. Happy for y'all to be joining us for today's conversation. Hello, Tyra. How are you doing on this beautiful Sunday evening? Yeah, that's what time of day
Oh,
it is.
yes. Look, we need a reminder. Yes. No, I am doing good. It has been, a relatively good week.
Yes, I have to say the same for me. The week went by so fast. Surprisingly, like I found myself being frustrated on Thursday because I wasn't doing anything.
Mm,
But the frustration only came from the fact that I was supposed to be doing something, and it sucks when you have something on your schedule like this is work related, and y'all say I'm supposed to be taking part in this, but now I'm not taking part in this. What's going on?
right, exactly.
I could have did
Exactly.
something else with this time.
Exactly.
But it was a good week, rested a good bit, so love it. Um, so you ready to jump into these conversations for today?
I am, yeah.
So I will be getting us started for today. And the thing that I really wanted to bring up is just how there's a lack of safe space for Black men to just express ourselves, have conversations about things without there being a need to make space for the entirety of the Black community or without the desire for wanting that safe space being critiqued as though that Black men in general are not deserving of a space to communicate with ourselves without any feedback from other people. I think about conversations of, oh, why are y'all not holding your homeboys accountable? And it's okay, we kind of do. There are those of us who do hold our male friends accountable for the actions that they do. But the thing about accountability is that, well, not even accountability. The thing about circle of control is that we cannot force somebody to do something that they already don't want to do. Like, you can call somebody out on like, man, that's fucked up, or that I need to stop cussing. Man, that's not okay. You need to stop doing that. Why are you cheating on your baby mama? Why are you not being a supporting friend? Why are you not doing these things? But at the end of the day, they have the choice of making the decisions of what they prefer. But outside of that, like I would love to just be in a safe space just to talk about my problems without there being any feedback or having to carry the weight of a community at all times, right?
Right, right.
So want to bring that up for discussion, see what some of the things that come up for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that, conversations like these are always, it obviously they may be triggering in nature, especially if you have been on the side of being harmed. But also what I think, well, there is no but, let me rephrase that. Um, on another note, I do believe that it does make space for, I think, really powerful conversations to be had because I think we can always learn from others' experiences. And so when we, especially April being uh, Domestic Violence and Sexual Abuse Awareness Month, I think it's important to, of course, highlight all of our stories, but especially given the nature of the stories that are prevalent in Black and Brown men
Mm,
um, and men of color. And I think even just highlighting stories that have been like popularized in media surrounding male sexual abuse, no matter if that's been like movies or TV shows that are based on true stories, if it's been fictionalized and things like that. So just to give honor to to people to specifically men's stories this month. And again, it is a caveat to say that it is not to mean that embodied women's stories are not important. They always
mm,
will, and for forever will always be important. However, we do not talk about men being violated throughout the course of their life too often. And so
Mhm.
I think that what we're going to do tonight is to really give space and to talk about what does it mean to be on the, I think, both ends of predator and prey, essentially. So yeah, I think that it's definitely going to be a great discussion.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up domestic violence because it brought up the book Breaking the Cycle. It
Mhm,
was put together. It's several authors that contribute to the creation of that book. And I think
yeah,
it's personal stories, but it was curated by the writer Zane. And for
mhm,
those who know of Zane or just want to know specific which Zane I'm referring to, because I know there's another author who goes by Zane in a different space, but Zane, African American woman, a black woman who focuses on erotica and had a cornerstone of the black community for some time, and I loved it for us. Her and Eric Jerome Dickey, but that's the author I'm referring to when I say Zane. But in that book, it was another one of those media that really opened my eyes on the traumas and a lot of people's personal um, experiences outside of my own. But in the book,
mhm,
it talked about domestic violence in a very broad way. Um, and one of the stories in there included a male survivor of domestic violence, and even his telling of what it was like trying to get help, what it was like feeling inferior, and the his abuser, if I remember correctly, because
mhm,
we recognize male on male domestic violence a little bit more than we recognize female to male
mhm.
domestic violence.
Absolutely.
In his his story was about him being abused by a woman,
Mhm,
right? And what that meant to his psyche and that development. And it would be beautiful for there to be avenues for people to share those stories and it be well received without the pushback of it's not your space to communicate. Um it's not your time yet to share your story because we still have to deal with the domestic violence on women. And I do wish that we lived in an environment where we can truly create that space for all the stories to be shared and received,
right.
um, and recognize that it is okay to share this table, to share this trauma as a
Mhm,
community, without there being some discord of well, what was she going through? What did he put her through in order for her to abuse him, right? Without
mhm,
there having to be an automatic response of making the male in the situation, the victim, I'm sorry, the perpetrator,
mhm,
or placing blame on him or making it seem as though there was anything that he may have contributed to earn the response of that abuse.
mhm.
Right. I would love for that mentality to just leave,
Yeah,
so we can really start to heal as a community, um, heal individually. But yeah,
yeah,
just some thoughts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that it's definitely important to, um, highlight that again, as it was made mention that when we're dealing, when we're even thinking about just the nature of domestic abuse, we tend to focus on the point of view as of the woman that's involved, and is because it's kind of like even like when a man is abused, thinking about how it sounds even to law enforcement, right? Because typically, let's just be honest, um in nature, most men, not saying all men,
Hmm.
most men are larger than women in like body size and body mass. So even from the perception of violence, right? It is always perceived that the man is the aggressor,
Hmm.
you know, because of the fact of, being larger body, just in general. Of course, like I say, not talking about all men, all women. So it's kind of like even with having to file a police report or, file a claim or what have you, it is, a very, I can only imagine like a very emasculating aspect to say, like, if you are a 6 foot man, you know, you have to fill out a report, right? Or have to tell law enforcement that your, girlfriend or your wife, who's this height, so many pounds, abused you,
Hmm.
like, or attacked you. Like, thinking about like how that sounds, right? And it's
Right.
something that, sometimes, of course, like, yeah, we may see like in the movies, or we see in TV shows and stuff like that, and we, not to say glorify, but it's kind of like fantasized, about the fact that, oh, like that man needs, his butt whooped, or like whatever. But rarely do we ever speak on the real cases of when men are abused by their spouses, and spouses who happen to be of the opposite gender. That just the nuances of even just like how it's, I don't know, not necessarily even just talked about, but how it's like even envisioned. Like, it's like
Hmm.
being on the other side of it. You may even think to yourself, okay, like, how did this 6 foot man get abused by this 5'6" woman? Like,
Hmm.
to like it's speaking like visually, it may not even make sense, you know so just even the nature of perception about how we
Hmm.
think about those aspects are just so mm, out there.
Yeah. Like when I was going to lean towards the political side first, but I think um mental health is always more important than that. And and what because it immediately came up to me about when it comes to black men's mental health. Now I'm in this for the real reasons, right? It's something that's advertised on my Psychology Today. My therapy thing is something that I stay true to, and it's not to distance myself from any other client who may want to seek my help for whatever it is that they're dealing with. But I mentioned that I upfront that I do specialize with black men and black men's mental health, while
Mhm.
also creating that space for those who are survivors of sexual trauma throughout the spectrum, right?
Right.
But I bring that up because so often we will get conversations about black men's mental health only when it comes to a black man who committed suicide. And
Mhm.
that's only in the cases where this suicide reaches national levels or national conversations, meaning is somebody who's either actor or an entertainer in some way that is recognized in throughout our society. When that happens, oh, let's go ahead and talk about it.
Mhm.
But where's the conversation outside of that? Uh, if you truly cared, you will want to make sure that we have this conversation before we have something to react to, right?
Right.
And that's why it's important for there to be safe spaces for Black men without having that weight of the community on us or without having that pushback. Because if we cannot have a safe space to talk about the toxic things that we hold
Mhm.
without the judgment of others, because I heard it best from somebody else. Men only listen to men anyways, right? Men operate, this mostly was talking about cishet men, but men operate, are moved through society to gain the approval of other men and not women, right? So why not have a space where all men can just sit and have these conversations and let it be checked in a healthy way where we're recognizing that, okay, this person who's addressing my faults is doing so in the efforts to help benefit me rather than doing so in efforts to own them, show, oh, that's why, get a got you moment out of it, right?
Hmm. Right.
And I think if we are able to have a little bit more of those kind of conversations, because I know there's some men's groups that exist, which I love, but if we're able to have a lot more of that in our society, I think it will be benefit not only the older generations, but especially the younger generation who's just looking for guidance, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Regardless of the daddy issues that we like to profess about, or the single mother home that we try to demonize and whatnot. Okay, yeah, those can be other things that contribute to the mental illness of people, which I know it does. But let's just have real life conversations. Like, brother, what's going on?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, And the other thing, like I mentioned, the political side is like black men. Of course, black women have their own weight that they carry in terms of blame, but the black community as a whole, when it comes to like major political competitions, oftentimes we see the target being, oh, the black community didn't show up like they were supposed to, with all these other things. And I want to time travel back into 2020. Biden, I was about to cuss, is running for office. We got that orange turd up there too and everything. And of course, Biden wins, right? And I remember so many posts saying thank black women this, black women that, which I'm not taking away from the achievements that black women made in that time because well deserved. But the quiet thing that wasn't even spoke on is the black men who showed up, right? Yeah, at that, I think it was 98% of black women voted for Biden, but there was
Mhm.
also 87% of black men who voted, or 86% of black men who voted for Biden as well. Are we not shining a light on that? Because that's a large majority. And then when we fast forward to this recent one, I'm grateful that black men are in this conversation now
Yeah.
because we as a community was like, wait, that 80 stood true. So did that 92, which love that for us. Um, but I remember how quickly people were ready to throw black men under the bus as to presenting us as potentially being the folly, I think that's the word, the
Hmm.
of the not of Kamala, as though we don't have agency of
Hmm.
knowing what the political spectrum is all about.
Right.
And we have Obama stepping out and pretty much um is what's the word, paternalizing um patronizing, no, patronizing black men, as though we don't have common sense to know what is not good for us and what is. Like, yeah, we have in every community, we have, especially in our community, we have the minority that is self-hating in a way.
Hmm.
Um and their drama, their feelings there is for a different conversation, and we can go into the validation of what they're feeling some other day. But yes, we have those, but they're not the loudest ones within the community, right? Like, it just
Hmm.
shows how distant a lot of people are with understanding and knowing who black men are. Like even when
Right.
I was looking at some of my friends, because I've made some posts like, yeah, we do need to get black men out there to support and all of that, but I didn't necessarily say that black men are just automatically going to vote Republican because why? I could recognize that, yeah, there's a potential of misogynoir to show up in this election, but we have black mamas. So what are we? What's the conversation that we're
Mhm.
having? But at the same time, seeing other people make comments like, "Yeah, black men, they don't ever show up for black women and all this other stuff." I'm like, who? You're talking about me too.
Right. Exactly.
Where are
Yeah.
we here? So it's like those kind of things just it's frustrating to see.
Mhm.
And it's like, when are we going to really open our eyes to see one, how much we hate black men for real?
Mhm.
Is there reasons behind it? We all have our reasons. I'm not even going to invalidate that for any person. But we need to not hate all black men or generalize to the
Right.
point that we're ostracizing people who are really here to find community, grow
Mhm.
together, and all of that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely a pervasive problem when we stigmatize or stereotype all people as like one thing. So when
Mm,
and the nature of black men, like we say, we can talk about how a lot of things we are doing that is uplifting, that is great to be in community. A lot of things we are still out of order about,
mm,
just out of order. But like you say, it's definitely a mixed bag when you, or it's, I wouldn't say a mixed bag, but it's definitely dangerous territory when you start to just look at, and specifically black men through this one lens. And to me, it's not an excuse when people say like, oh, well, this has been my experience with
mhm,
black men. And so it's kind of like, yeah, but you're not stepping outside of yourself for a second. This has been your experience, but that is not to say
mhm.
that that is the only experience. So it's kind of
Preach.
like when we have this pervasive conversation, which we'll have another day, about why black men and black women, when we talk about the whole nature of interracial dating, and people will use the excuse that, oh, because I've been treated this way by technically my people of my own skin color, this is why
Mhm.
I date outside of my race, which is not a valid reason to date outside of your race. If you're going to date outside of your race, let it be because you have an open heart and you don't care what the nature of your person looks like.
You a
Just
read.
because you did not grow up with black men and black girls as anime nerd, as quote unquote anime nerds, or you felt different, or even sometimes felt ostracized, that is not a justification
Mhm.
of why you have to downplay who it is that you love. So again, that's another conversation for another day, but it reminds me of this sort of topic, because when we are speaking about our experiences with black men, we cannot just group all black men together. We cannot just say, oh, this is the black male experience. So, we have to break that down a little bit more. We have to speak from the I. Yes, if I've had harmful experiences with black men, then I know I can acknowledge that, I can address that, but somewhere along the line I have to do the work in saying that, but I know that this is not the only experience, even though it's been my experience.
Mm.
You
Did you hear that?
know.
I heard a word that was just dropped. That's all I know. But another thing, like it really does irk me when these kinds of conversations, like, well, first off, when those things impact me on a personal level, from the people that I've known throughout my life that I've shown kindness and love to, regardless of how they may have treated me or how life, right?
Mhm.
And it's like when people know you and then they still center themselves on something that you say that has absolutely nothing to deal with them. And I think
Right.
back to a moment when I saw this post about it was a sexual assault related post geared towards children, well, boys. And it was talking about make sure that your boys, essentially they know the signs of someone preying on them because
Mhm,
we don't teach that to little boys. And honestly, we don't teach it as well to little girls, but
mhm,
we don't actively engage in the signs of noticing when someone is looking to prey on a young boy.
mhm.
Right. And then it's like identifying good touch, bad touch, and all this other stuff. And I forget all the details of that post. And I just shared it. I shared it because I knew it was specifically towards black boys and having that and starting that conversation of protecting black boys from predators. And a friend of mine, love her, she posted on because it was like a step guide. She posted under there and talk about, well, don't forget about our black girls. And I'm like,
Yeah, like
you know what I do on a regular basis. You know
exactly.
what I talk about, and you know that I often create space, regardless of the day, to promote and advocate for black women,
Mm,
for women in general. And here I am creating a space to advocate for something that I myself experienced, and that many other young boys experience throughout this world. And
right.
here we are centering it away from the topic at hand, because this is a minority, well, a minority of in terms of speaking on it, right? I remember there was a statistic in the state of Georgia. I forget exactly which website I was on. I wish I could find it. But the statistic came from, I think, 2021.
Mhm,
Um, and just off the back of your head, it's related to child sexual abuse.
mhm.
Which gender do you think had the largest percentage? Young boys or young girls?
Probably young girls.
The surprise was in the state of Georgia was actually young boys.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
I was shocked at that because
mm,
I went into that expecting the opposite as well.
right, right.
And the percentage difference was about 2%,
Okay.
which 2% is not necessarily a large number, but if it's sexual assault, it's a large number. Uh,
Mhm,
above 1% is a large number. But yeah, it was 36% of the cases for that year.
mhm,
Um, and this is including adults as well to just explain the breakdown. But 36% of the cases were young boys and like 34% were young girls. And I'm
mhm.
like, why is it that we don't talk about this? Why is it that we're not speaking on the impact of these young boys? And it was reported. And it's also important to recognize that these are reported cases. And numbers will vary outside of the statistic. But these are reported cases. We have this information, but we're not marketing or we're not um, having the conversations about protecting these young boys.
Yeah. And I also think that a part of this conversation too, it also stems from how we associate sex in society. I
Mm,
think a lot of times, of course, the horrific nature of, our young women and girls that are preyed upon, I think that sex in general when you're younger is talked about in a predatory nature when we're speaking to our young women. But I don't think that we have the same kind of conversations with our young men. Sex is actually something that we talk about with young men as like a rite of passage. So
mm,
even from being young, it's kind of like like older adults will have these things about like, oh, like you have a crush on her or, like things like that. And mind you, crushes are harmless. They're, a lot of times they're harmless, they're innocent. But as boys get older, I think, and we start to decipher what certain things like mean to us, like, of course, I have followed a whole lot of forums that have men talking about like they were having their first sexual experiences like when they were like 12, 13 years old, willing, what they believe as willingly engaging with older people, you know and it's just so yeah, I think that that's just one of the first things that out of the many things that we talk about that's really like a main difference. I think that that is a key one, the way that we tend to associate sexual
Mhm,
behavior with boys and not have the conversations of like viewing your body also as protection,
mhm.
in the same ways that we do young women. So I think that that's one aspect that's a part of a whole entire complicated equation.
Yeah. And I say this is a great way of transitioning to your conversation,
Mhm.
Tyrell. And
Yeah.
just to bring it up for those who found the podcast, listen to the podcast, and all these other great things, welcome. So this weekend, it was the first time Tyrell and I actually met in person, like for the
Yeah.
first time. So yay! And we've known each other for like 2 years now. Yeah, but
Actually,
love
it's
it.
three because we actually met in 2022, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So it's been 3 years.
And look, this is
And
just goes to prove that look, if y'all want true friendships and stuff like that, just put in the work. Like you can have
you
long
can.
distance friendships and then eventually meet up. No excuses. No
No
excuses.
excuses at all. And so there was this event this weekend that centered on black male survivor. Well, I don't think it was specifically black men. No, I think it was specifically black men. Never mind.
Mhm.
Back to what I was saying. Black male survivors of childhood sexual abuse or just sexual abuse in general. It didn't specify childhood, but the panelists, which included myself and another gentleman, um, both of our experience happened in childhood.
Yeah.
So, in that panel, we started talking about our experiences, some video that we watched, but we also started talking about some of the media too. And Tyrell, you also asked a beautiful question about some of the media yesterday, and wanted to continue that for this podcast. So I'll just go ahead and throw the reins back over to you, so we can go ahead and get into this.
Yeah. So again, I just want to commend Vernon for such a wonderful job and that he did at this Courageous Conversations event. It was so great, not just for us to be in person, but just to hear him, just tell the raw honesty of his experience and his truth. So it's just, all times just commendable. So y'all up there, just give claps up to Vernon, for all of his dedication and all his hard work. But yeah, as we were talking, through the Q&A, I started thinking about media depictions of black and brown and people of color, like maybe young boys or like men's experiences that have been told in popular media. And of course it hasn't been like across obviously many films or many TV shows across the board, but there are some particular men-centered stories that I think stood out to me when it comes to handling the nature of talking about sexual abuse, especially being young. And so I just wanted to kind of like highlight some of those stories for us. And one of the very first stories that I can ever really remember of a movie that talked about childhood sexual abuse that I could actually visually remember, and I didn't know like the nuances of all what entailed abuse at the time, but I was still old enough to somewhat understand it, and it actually came from a um, a black boy. In the film that had Denzel Washington in it, and I think it was Derek Luke's one of his major first roles is
Hmm.
Antwone Fisher, in 2002 movie Antwone Fisher.
That
And
movie?
I absolutely love that film. So if you are not familiar, Antwone Fisher is a young black man who grows up in a deeply, abusive, foster home. He experiences of course, physical, emotional, and of course, sexual abuse at the hands of an older woman in the foster home. And so, again, just the nature of his vulnerability, when he does get to the point of like revealing his story, it's a way for him to one just open up, but to confront the past, and of course, always just have a hand in reclaiming narrative. So again, that was one of the very earliest stories I can
Mhm.
remember as a child. I think I was maybe what around 8, 9 years old. And again, even though I didn't necessarily understand all of the language, of the film at the time until I got older, of course, it was still a very interesting depiction to watch a very raw, vulnerable, and realistic story in a way. And then I also think about if you are familiar with the show Criminal Minds, Shamar Moore's character, he plays Derek Morgan. Derek has a um, very entrenched storyline. Obviously, if you're not familiar with Criminal Minds, Derek Morgan is a black man. He's an FBI agent who works for the FBI unit, um, and there's a storyline where he has to confront his youth center coach that molested him and several other young boys when they were young, and particularly this happened at a time right after Derek had lost his father.
Mhm.
And so, the things that we start to understand about Derek's character, about why he kind of overcompensates with some like hyper masculinity at times. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily go into like being toxic, but Derek is that, traditional, like alpha male,
Mhm.
like so we tend to understand that. We get shown about the nature of the reason why he has emotional intimacy, like with some of the women that he's involved with, why he keeps them at a distance. We see why he's particularly, especially protective over children, because we ultimately see that in quite a couple episodes where, yeah, usual cases, it gets under all of their skins, but particularly cases when it involves children, Derek always has like these like very standalone moments. And then when it gets to reveal a bit more of his story, you really understand why.
Mhm.
Um, Another story that I was thinking of, something that kind of got well, no, one other story that's actually a real story I was thinking of. If we're familiar with the show Pose, the aspect of talking about the character of Pray Tell, I remember that Billy Porter actually did an interview with Out Magazine, and
Mhm.
Billy Porter actually candidly spoke about being sexually abused by his stepfather for about 4 years. And so in that op-ed, kind of letter, he wrote that he eventually told his mother about it. And the reason why he told her was because he wanted to protect his sister from the same fate.
Mhm.
And, and I think, while Billy Porter, he believes that his mom believed him, but she wasn't in a position to do anything. It's like, as a mother, as he said, like in a quote one time, it's like, in my mother's defense, like where would she go? Like what would she do? She was a disabled woman who couldn't get a job with 2 mouths to feed, you
Mhm.
know? And so essentially, as a little boy, he told his mom, like, I would stay, like somehow I'm gonna save myself. What is, can we do? And for a child to have to say that, it's like, you're stuck in a horrible, horrible circumstance, and there's just nothing that you can do about it. So I really love that depiction. Two last depictions I want to bring up, and then we're just going to have an all out just conversation. um these last two stories aren't particularly black or brown centered, but they do involve LGBTQ blended family. If anybody is familiar with the show The Fosters. They did a kind of candid. It was a side story, but it ended up being a very candid story about Brandon, who is the oldest child of biological father of Mike and biological mother of Steph in the show. And Steph is married to her partner Lena, and they have a blended family of biological and foster children. And I think it was in season 2 of their show. Brandon is picked up by his dad's girlfriend at the time, Danny, and he's drunk. She comes to get him from a party. Danny is considerably like younger, closer to his age. However, the two of them have sex, and it takes a couple episodes before Brandon works up the courage to actually tell his moms about it. And the episode, I don't think it was necessarily divisive at the time, but it ended up garnering a lot of responses. I love the depiction of it because I love the rawness and the realness of it. When he tells his moms, of course, they believe him. They want to take action immediately after talking with the family. And it's Mike is the one, the dad is the one that goes through that typical, kind of disbelief. He's like, well, Brandon is the one that slept, he's the one that slept with her, and making all of these excuses. And like Steph has to point out to him, what would you do if this was one of the girls, and this happened? So pointing out the double standard and the hypocrisy. So that's the nature of what that storyline was meant to reveal. And I think what was happening, a lot of fans did not, of course, like Mike's response because he didn't immediately side with his son in this situation. But I took a humanistic approach to viewing Mike as I do with anything with any media. Mike is coming from a place not just as a father, but this happened with like a woman he loved. So
Mm.
it's like, how do you, in certain circumstances, rectify that your girlfriend has had sex with your son? So again, it's very divisive how that episode went. A lot of people did not like the fact that even Steph in the story, Steph and Mike were consistently saying that he had sex with her and things like that, which a lot of people don't believe that when you are violated, that obviously that is consensual sex. So they wish they would have written the episode more as to just call it what it is. It was rape. But the only time really rape was brought up was when they were talking about that, yeah, they were going to have her arrested because she essentially raped a minor. And so in some aspects, people felt like they could have handled things a little bit differently, but it's all good. Last instance I want to bring up, also not necessarily a character of color, but currently a story that's actually happening now on the show Chicago Med. There is a character by the name, they call them by their last names all the time, so I can't think of his first name. His name is Frost. He's a pediatric doctor in the ED on Chicago Med, and they've been having this track of this story with him where he was a child star, and now he's like obviously a pediatric doctor, and there is a older woman who has come back into his life, and it was revealed in some episodes that she had an inappropriate relationship with him when he was a teenager on the show. And they go through the story of, she was the one that advocated for him on the show, and this and that. Of course, growing up in showbiz and all that type stuff, he was a lot of times isolated and things like that. And so it really got from this past week's episode where he really had to confront her in saying that no, part of the reason why I justified why this was okay was because he wanted to protect her. He felt like if he said anything that he would lose her. And so, coming from her point of view, she's like, where is this coming from? Even though she even admittedly knows that what she did was wrong, she wants to twist this into, but we loved each other. But, we loved each other. And him having to understand that regardless of what he may have felt for her as a teenager, it was still inappropriate.
Mm.
And her as the adult in the situation, you know, she's wrong as five left shoes. you know. So, I bring up these stories because these were the stories that immediately kind of captured my attention as we were talking about, of course, boys and young men, men in general having been in situations where they were violated or they were raped. And it's one of those things that even trying to again have that kind of mind frame of men can be.
Mm.
And I think that people, when they think about rape, they automatically think, or being violated, they automatically think of something that ultimately has to happen in an aggressive manner or something that
Mhm.
has to happen in prison. or something like that. Obviously there's even jokes made about it, don't drop the soap, and just all these types of things. But violation does not have to be innately violent.
Mhm.
And that's something we talk about with our young women, but we also need to talk about with our young men. We have predators out here that will prey on the nature of your emotional state, your vulnerable state, will try to isolate you from other people. And the nature violation does not mean that the encounter itself has to be violent. It can be a situation where they have twisted emotional feelings to where you feel like you love this person, or you may actually love this person, and now you feel a sense in protecting them.
Mhm.
So again, when we talk about the nature of violation, it's not just about the violation, it's about the mental and about the emotional aspects of it as well. So I just wanted to know, like, obviously, even if you obviously never seen these movies or these shows or things like that, just like, what's your kind of like thought process about these kind of small instances of these characters having to go through what it is that they've gone through in their mental and emotional mind state?
So you're just going to deliver a whole booklet. And be like, just go ahead and respond to that as best you can. Okay. I'm just
Look, now it's look, pass this on to you.
um, um well, before I even go into my response, I forgot at the start to at least say trigger warning. So trigger
Um,
warning people.
come back with that.
Right. I'll put it in the episode title. But anyways, so I was I want to go back to Antwone Fisher because that is
Mm,
one of the films that
mm,
I definitely watched, and it really stood out to me because like I brought up yesterday,
mm,
I will say this is one of those films that helped shape me as well,
mm,
to help me identify. Oh wait,
mhm,
certain things are not okay, but and then it's one of those because when I experienced watching the film, I even remember the internal dialogue that I had, not in
mhm,
as much detail, but I know that the conflicting thoughts was related to my experience because it was someone within my age range for the most
mhm,
part. And then we have this whole adult here, right?
mhm,
And this
right.
is elderly. Well, I can't say elderly, but she would have been like I know realistically she was in her 40s, 50s, but they kind of portrayed her to be a lot older than that for whatever reason.
Mhm,
Um, but anyways, this is an older woman who's engaging in sex with this child, and I can see myself in this child because we're about the
mm,
same age as I'm
right.
seeing what's happening to him, right? And
Mhm,
then I think about conversations of some of the men that was in my surrounding, like my uncles, my older cousins and whatnot, who would make statements as though like it's okay for um, teenagers to be having sex, right?
mm,
Are it being encouraged that I'm going to have sex someday, right?
mhm,
So essentially get ready for that potential outcome to happen. So
right.
it's like a battle of this doesn't seem okay. This doesn't look okay at all. This seems inappropriate, but then on this end it's supposed to be encouraged, but this kid looks scared. I
Mhm,
feel afraid for him.
right.
But don't I supposed to want this? And all these dynamics are just going back and forth and to the point where it's like, no, this is just not okay.
Right. Yeah.
Like, um, and I'm happy I got to that point, but that film really does show the impact of what childhood sexual abuse, especially for black boys, looks like, right? And then it even furthers the conversation. I don't know how old I was when I started having this conversation with people about the erection,
Mhm,
right? Um, what does it mean if a guy gets erect? That doesn't mean that it's considered sexual assault. That's not rape, but that's
Mhm.
not the case. It is still sexual assault. Erection is something that's automatic. A
Right.
wind can blow at the tip of your penis, and now you're just like, oh, whew, what was that, right? And
Exactly.
it's just a normal reaction that happens. Just because a normal and natural thing happens does not mean that it's wanted for you, for
Mhm.
certain actions to happen to you.
Right.
All right. So that film, a life changer. I didn't know that much about the Billy Porter story. I do remember the episode in Pose when they brought that
Mhm.
up, which I found powerful as well. But even knowing this backstory,
Yeah.
makes it even more powerful. And then it also explains some of what he's going through right now,
Mm. Yeah.
in his older life. And I just want to hug that man because he's a great guy, but
Yes. Yes. Love
a
his
lot
story.
going on. But yeah, Pose, just a phenomenal show altogether.
Mhm.
Now I don't have much comments on the other things that you suggest because I do not watch Chicago Med.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
no, it's fine. And yeah, I just, I brought because like for whatever reason, like though obviously sure I've watched like a lot of TV and movies
hmm
that have dealt with, obviously other storylines that, pertain to this. It's just that for some reason those particular
hmm
storylines propped out in my head. And even when we're talking about stories that are outside of the black experience, the reason why Brandon's story on the Fosters stuck out in my head was because the Fosters centers on like them as teenagers. And I
hmm
watched the Fosters, of course, while I was a teenager. So
hmm
it was like looking, obviously, even though Brandon is not a black, man, but like he was this like young boy, like still like young teenage guy who
hmm
was had a typical like experience. He got drunk, unexpectedly. And he's looking to this almost stepmother of a figure, like
hmm
she's going to do the adult thing and take care of him. And there's this moment where like this just happens. And like as an audience, we're like, wait a minute, what the hell? Like
Yeah.
what just happened? It wasn't one of those like predatory. And again, we think about these moments that do not necessarily feel predatory. There were no like lingering looks, between him and his dad's girlfriend in previous episodes where you were like, oh yeah, something is going to happen between them, or things like that.
hmm
And I give kudos to the writers because when it happened, they didn't immediately address it. It took like episodes for them to address it because they wanted Brandon to experience what happens in the aftermath. They want him to have those feelings of guilt and shame and things like that that, a character like such as him would go through. And not just the fact that he of course like slept with an older woman, but this older woman happened to be
hmm
his dad's girlfriend.
hmm
So they wanted him to go through those experiences before they eventually tackled the front center of the story. And like I said, even for the character on Chicago Med, the fact that he has to reconcile about this woman who made him feel protected in the midst of show business, you know, is also the one that preyed on him because it was inappropriate.
hmm
you know so and so I just think that those two separate stories, I think it's really, they really did shine a light, no matter if you thought it was completely positive, completely negative, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I just think, when we have depictions and we have stories like that, it's very powerful to see because again, a lot of times when we talk about violence and assault, usually we are, focused primarily on our women, which is again important, but we also need to make sure we are giving that time and attention to our young boys and our young men. And something that you brought up earlier that I kind of wanted to touch on, when you were talking about signs to look for.
hmm
um I did, I was doing some research after we got done with the event, that we went to. And I was coming across this article. I think it was an article from Glad Media, and they talked about and also other parenting resources. And so I think this is a great moment for like a PSA,
Okay.
for any of our listeners who happen to have children, or like deal with small children, or things like that. It gave some tips to be on the lookout for, and these are signs that they were saying that you can teach your young children. And again, this is for children in general, but specifically making sure that you have this conversation with your young boys as well. So the number one thing that they said, and I pulled up the article here just to make sure I'm referencing right. The number one thing that they said was teach your children about when adults make them feel excessively special.
Mm,
Like, so making sure that they know that when they hear language like, oh, like you're my favorite, or you're different from the others, things like that, that's giving really, specialized attention. That's the kind of like the first, before even anything physical may happen with a child. That's usually like predators who like often groom, by making children feel special or indebted to them. So they're like teaching children to be careful of language like that. Second thing that they talked about was the nature of keeping secrets. Again, talking about language. If like an adult asks them to like, hey, this is just between you and me, or threats, or even like those subtle threats, like, oh, you'll get in trouble if you tell, you know, like, so anytime where adults are asking them to keep secrets, they need to speak on it you know and then of course we move into like the physical boundary violations. They were even saying, if you're coming across like excessive tickling or wrestling or touching, and it's not even just, like, of course we teach our kids about good touch and bad touch, but also teach them about when suddenly accidental things keep happening. So if an adult like brushes up against their their genitals, it's like, oh, sorry, like that was by accident. And yeah, they may associate, okay, that was a bad touch, but the person said that they were sorry. So they may not think twice of it. But if it's something that keeps happening, now it's like, okay, this is not just unwanted touch, but now they consider it just plain.
mm,
As kids tend to associate play. So just being aware of that. Last two tips that they had was making sure kids recognize aspects of like over involvement. So making sure that when it comes to like tutoring, coaches, sleepovers, right? Um, Try when adults try to create that like dependence, right? So thinking about like people who are caregivers, or even sometimes our parents, when children become over reliant on particular adults in their life, some red flags to look out for. you know and then I think also, just the last thing that they said was just the nature, of course, like of age inappropriate behavior, which is something that, again, for boys, because of the fact that boys are typically associated with sex being a positive thing the younger that they are. Having boys to also, young boys and just young children in general, but especially young boys, to speak out when um if there for any reason that they're being shown pornography,
mm,
or like, do you have adult men especially around them that are making like sexualized jokes, or they're asking kind of inappropriate things, like, so if the kid hears like, oh, kissing, or like touching, or like things like that, like, those are words that you can train, I wouldn't say train, but teach a child to be aware of,
mm,
to come to you, like if they're hearing things like that. And it's not to say that there is innately something predatory going on, but it's so that, it doesn't escalate and you can be made aware
mhm.
of what it is that they're hearing. So those were just some of their tips. Of course, there's probably other tips out there, but I really found that article to be just really helpful about signs to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's a reminder why I continue to tell people I don't think I can be a parent because
Mm.
it's not that I'm incapable of doing it because multiple people just let me know, Vernon, you'll make a great father. Thank you. But at the end of the day, knowing these things, I don't know how crazy I will be. And I'm not trying to figure that out because this is even kind of erupted into a debate in one of the classes that I have, where I was talking about child rearing. I don't know how we got into this conversation, but one of the things is a student asked me, well, what if you um give your, because they were asking me why I didn't want children. What if you had kids and you gave your child, to a sibling or a family member, and they, have their little secrets or whatever? And I'm just like, first and foremost, if my child comes back to me and tell me one of my relatives told me, well, told them that they need that it's only between them and not to tell me anything, they are never seeing my kid again.
Exactly.
I don't care who it is. You will not ever see my kid again. It's without me being present, or this being a family event, and you will not be around my kid in any private spaces because why are you telling my kid to have any kind of secrets?
Hmm.
Right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yeah, just again, just
let me know.
behavior that is just that's it's
It's
inappropriate.
inappropriate.
It's inappropriate. And
And
even so, there was a hot debate on Facebook actually that I was reading recently. Now, this pertained more so towards a little girl, but it could be applied to just
Mhm,
children in general, especially obviously our boys as well. This mom, she got into an argument with her brother's girlfriend about the fact that she does not want her daughter sitting on like men's laps, no matter if they're family members or not. And, there was a lot of hot debate in the comments, that whole classic thing of like, well, what's the problem? Like, children, they sit on adults like, they sit on laps. Like, what's the problem? But she made very special mention to say like she doesn't. Now, I believe that any type of adult obviously can be a predator, man, woman, whatever. But she made a specific aspect of to say like her having a little girl, she doesn't like the image, regardless, family member or not. She does not like the image of like her daughter sitting on men's lap, like sitting on men's laps, you know. And so, you had a lot of people that were, backing her up and saying like, hey, this is her child.
mhm,
She can make whatever rules she wants to, for her child, you know. And so, yeah, but it was just a very, interesting, kind of conversation that was happening. Of course, like in the comments, always reading comments or
mhm.
these
A good time.
always a good time. But yeah, so even when we consider like even small behaviors like we consider to be innocent, because you could have that mentality like, okay, yeah, children, they're playful, like they just want to come, they want to come sit on your lap, and like that's how you play with them, you talk to them, you read to them, like
Mhm,
I mean, to a lot of people that's like what are we doing? But on the other hand, a lot of people say that when you don't pick up on signs, that's a lot of times how things begin.
mhm.
So it is not to say that it has to be all or nothing or anything like that, but it is to say that just to take heed and to take caution.
I agree. I agree.
So,
Okay, so
what's going to
um,
be our last topic for tonight?
our last topic is going to be related to okay, let's put it this way. It's two people doing a similar thing with different situations, but it's the broader group that I have an issue with. So that's where we're going to go. And I'm going
Okay.
to try not to rant here. For anybody, just to start things off, I'm just going to mention the name Shannon Sharpe. That's a part of this conversation, okay? Because so I'll start off with Shannon Sharpe, explaining what's going on there, and then go into this situation with this woman named Ayesha Howard, who's also the baby mama of, I think he's a basketball player, NFL player. He's a sports person. He's an athlete, by the name of Anthony Edwards. So to start off with Shannon Sharpe. Shannon Sharpe, in recent news, he's being sued by this OnlyFans creator. Apparently, they've been in a relationship for the last 2 years, a financial relationship, and I think romantic as well. Um, and within the confounds of their relationship, especially the sexual side, there's a little bit of kink play going on, and it does seem as though that kink play went a little bit beyond the norms of their discussions, which is a violation. And this is not going to be going into the details of that because that's a whole nother conversation. And
Mhm.
y'all can listen to the Holy podcast for that. Right now, we're not talking about that yet. Um, and there's an age difference here as well. Shannon Sharpe
Mhm.
is like 56-ish. He's close to 60. And the young woman here, she's either 20 or 21. But this situation that they're in started when she was like of the age of 19. Now, just starting off, there's the lawyer who's involved here, Tony Busby. That's the same guy who's kind of all about scamming celebrities out of their money. So that in itself kind of gives its own ding to this story. So again, not going into that, just giving y'all context. This is not to say whether or not the legalities of whatever is going on there is correct or not, because that's not this conversation. Now that we got that background, let me move into this situation with Ayesha Howard. So Ayesha Howard, she is like I mentioned, she's the baby mother of Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards, he's like 21, I think now. He's in his early 20s. He's new to whatever athletic field that he's in. Like I said, it's sports. I forgot which one. I don't follow this man's career like that. It is what it is. Now, Aisha is in her 40s, if I'm not mistaken. She's up there. She's either 39, 40, whatever the case may be. She has had a baby by Anthony Edwards, and the reason why the story is recirculating about them, because I heard about it some time ago and I was disgusted. But the resurfacing of this story is because there's conversations. I don't know if this is factual or not, but there's conversations that Anthony Edwards essentially said, well, let me just go ahead and pay 18 years worth of child support up front and then just be done with it because he communicated to Aisha Howard that he does not want to be a father, specifically the father of her child. And where I feel on that, and when it comes to fathers giving up their parental rights, that's another conversation we're not going into because that's not what we're talking about today. There's a lot of stuff about both of these situations that require a lot of unpacking and nuance, but that's not the issue. The thing that I want to bring up is these predatory behaviors of older individuals going after these younger people whose brains are still under development, right? Whew. When we look at the Shannon Sharpe situation, the age difference is roughly 40 years. And then with the Aisha situation, that one's roughly 20 or so. Correct my math, do that on your own time. I love it for you. I don't feel like doing it right now. This is a problem, people. Like you can go all about the legalities of the situation being on her side, his side, all this other stuff, whatever. We really need to talk about the real predatory behaviors of these older individuals in these situations. Yes, in each case, they were considered legal adults. Yes, they have autonomy to make decisions of who they choose to interact with and consent to having sex with. And from my knowledge, these sexual encounters were consensual. And again, there's other allegations within that Shannon Sharpe situation that I'm not touching because that's not what I'm talking about here. All right. Regardless of where the court cases fall, we have to recognize the pattern of behavior uh, of of these individuals and individuals like them and call it predatory because it is predatory. Because you being a whole adult out here, and I mean you've gone through the extension courses, you are old enough to have multiple degrees, you're old enough to have gone through K-12 plus a bachelor's, and you're dealing with somebody that is just now starting to experience life rather than somebody who has a lot more wherewithal about what it means to be an adult is predatory. Like, okay, I want to just have a little fling or whatever. Okay, if you, again, you're 18 years old, you can make the decision and you want to engage with somebody that's older than you, it is what it is. But to trap these people in relationships into pregnancy, that's not okay. Honestly, engaging with somebody that young is not okay. I'm 32 and I don't want nothing that's 18. I don't want nothing that's 19. I've been hit on by people that's 21 years old, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, there's a huge difference in terms of our lived experiences. They're still growing. I would not feel comfortable cuffing somebody that is 21 years old. And it's not because of me feeling like I will be a predator in this situation, because I believe in autonomy. They have the free will to do whatever they want to do. I'm not trying to corrupt nobody. It's none of that happening. But what value can they bring to my life as a whole adult here? They're not financially secure. And even if they happen to be financially secure, there's a mental barrier that they have yet to cross, and that is having a complete and full frontal cortex. Their brain's not even fully developed yet. Like they're still malleable, they're still easily manipulated. Like, come on, people, what are we doing? So I I want to start that conversation of just addressing the real issue, which is this age difference. And again, it's not saying that it's illegal behavior, because it is completely legal. They're full recognized adults by law. And to my knowledge, they were not approached by these individuals before the age of 18 or anything like that. But we need to really start to have those conversations and reflecting on the barely legal crowd who prey on those people. So, what are some of your takes?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think that I think what adds to this situation is that these people are like have celebrity statuses that are attached to them. So
Mhm.
which means that because they are in the limelight, it puts a extra microscope on them. Because I think like in our day-to-day lives, like if you found out, like, oh, your friend or like your boss's friend's cousin or whatever like was seeing somebody that was 15 years younger than them or older than them, like you could really like care or not care. That's not your life. However, I think when we insert ourselves into celebrity life, we tend to become myopic in some of our views. And because of the fact we can hyper focus
Mm,
on the drama aspect and not the real aspect that I think that, like what you're getting at. I think for me, the reason why I find it disparaging with the whole like Shannon Sharpe situation and the Aisha Curry situation, I mean Aisha Howard, excuse me, not Curry. Excuse my faux pas, not Curry.
yeah,
Aisha Howard situation
she pulls up.
is yeah, is just the nature of the power dynamics that are in play.
Mhm.
And speaking as like an educator who does deal with like younger students, of course, it's like I think about power dynamics all the time, and I'm not obviously even a celebrity or a status or anything like that. Older individuals may are a lot of times may hold more life experience, financial stability, social influence that leads to an imbalance in whatever encounter or interaction that you are having. And so, even though when we talk about consent or either coercion, while legal age defines adulthood, to me, true consent requires freedom from manipulation, freedom from coercion, or undue influence. And yeah, in certain circumstances, yeah, the age aspect may not be a problem. And especially as we get older, I think we tend to think about age gaps a lot of times as like almost like gross like when like the age gaps are like younger. So there's a big difference when you are 21 and you are involved with somebody like who's 35 or almost 40. And those I think age gaps tend to get you know, uh narrower, should I say.
Mhm.
They tend to get more narrow when we get up in age. So to me, like I wouldn't have the same reaction of seeing like somebody who is like 40 who may be dating somebody who's like 55 close to 60.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, no, it doesn't ring the same way. And I think, like you say, because our developmental years, of course, happen a lot of times when we're young, our full frontal lobe does not even fully develop, like you say, until the time we're in our mid 20s. So even though you are by technically a legal age of an adult at 18, that does not mean that your mind has maturated.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's just really about this like public perception, and even just like how people were trying to compare or contrast like Shannon Sharp situation to like what Tracy Ellis Ross said like in a recent interview that like does not have merit. How she was saying like she typically like likes to date younger men, and how people were trying to make this argument where it's like, well, yeah, y'all always want to get on older men about dating younger women, but what about like somebody like Tracy Ellis Ross who like has just said that hey, she prefers dating younger men. And it's like, first of all, those two stories have absolutely almost no correlation.
Mhm.
Shannon Sharp is currently involved in controversy over allegations of coercion, SA, and emotional abuse for with this young woman, suggesting questions of empower balance and possible exploitation. Tracy Ellis Ross, who is phenomenal talent, was just giving an interview where she was just expressing the fact that her interest lies in dating younger men in general. There is no
Mhm.
allegations, no coercion. She's not having predatory behavior or grooming, type of behavior. So again, no kind of correlation, in my book as well. So I think that, in short that when we talk about these aspects, yeah, it ultimately comes down to like that public perception. Social attitudes towards age disparity are always going to vary, and they're also always going to be influenced by gender norms and reinforcing stereotypes. So what we consider is acceptable or not acceptable for a man or a woman to do, it's always twisted, into uh disparaging remarks.
Mhm. And thank you for clearing something up for me because there was this meme I saw that had Shannon Sharp and Tracy Ellis Ross together, and I was like, I don't get the reference. There was like these two are a perfect match. I was like, what are we talking about? I was
Yeah,
like,
like what
will
are we
they make
talking
a
about?
cute
Yeah,
couple? I
no, yeah,
guess.
yeah. And it was something
Like,
that I had came across just like on a video, like I was scrolling through
mhm,
social media, and yeah, they were just having this whole conversation of just like trying to bring up like, oh, what is the difference of what Shannon Sharp, is going through when Tracy Ellis Ross just brought up the fact that she prefers dating younger men.
mhm.
And I'm like,
And it's
her dating choices involve consenting adult men.
mhm.
Like that's different. Like I say, she is not embroiled in the nature of controversy right now.
Exactly. And it's important to recognize that she did not say she's into dating teenagers. Younger is very broad.
Exactly.
That can be 7 years younger. It can be 5 years younger. It can be
Exactly.
20, which is still an appropriate age because she's in her 60s.
Mm,
So t 20 years younger than that is like somebody in their 40s. And
mhm.
again, that is perfectly fine because this is somebody who's a whole adult here developmentally. And even just to go back to something that I mentioned earlier, like what you do in your personal time is your business. At the end of the day, consenting adult, whatever. But there is a need to think about those power dynamics and how that may influence the relationship that you have. And something else that I want to tackle before we even end the show is the amount of people who mention, and of course this is they're saying this in terms of like, shaming Shannon Sharp for his decisions, is when people bring up the, oh, you are rich, you can choose whatever woman that you want to do all this kinky stuff with and all this other stuff. He made a decision. That's the thing I need people to recognize. He made an active choice. He knows that he has, for the lack of a better words, the pick of the litter. He knows that he can choose someone who's older, who's into this kink play, someone who's around his age that may be interested in doing these things. He actively made the decision to engage with this person who he knew was 19 years old. He knows what access he has, and he leaned into that access and chose this. Going into the Ayesha Howard situation, she knew about this kid. She knew because there is a whole community of women. Let's let's go ahead and bring this out who spy on these young recruits. They know their ambitions. They know that they will be sitting potentially to be drafted. They're on the short list to be on a team. And there's a slew of women who keep an eye on these young men for the sole purpose of sneaking their way in there and grabbing them up either to make them their husband or make them their baby daddy. And that is not okay. That is extremely inappropriate and is very manipulative. Right? Even if they have the financial backing, which does give them power and influence,
Yeah,
but there's also the lack of real lived experience that they're lacking, which shifts the power dynamic in the hands of the older party.
exactly. Exactly. And yeah, and I just think that in moving forward, I think that we have to do more in our conversations about addressing power dynamics and age
Hmm.
more appropriately. And I think that that begins with moving beyond thinking of like legal is this ethical kind of thinking,
Hmm.
right? Just because someone is 18 doesn't mean a relationship is ethically healthy for either of you. you know
Right.
we have to look at the emotional maturity, the life experience, finances, all those sorts of things. And that we also need to, if you find yourself in a situation where you are questioning those things, always center those questions in the nature of power. Do I have more money? Do I have more fame or influence? Who can walk away from this situation more easily? Right? Who has the more life experience or knowledge to manipulate a situation?
Hmm.
Right? So in some cases, if you are 35 and you're dating somebody that's 22, again, that's a lot of times it may be seen as fine. But if you are a 35-year-old boss, landlord, mentor, or you hold some sort of financial or emotional leverage, then that's different.
Hmm.
So take stock in how you think about yourself. We also need to be teaching our younger people and our older people, because we have some people who do prey on, obviously, our older generation as well, teaching older and younger to recognize grooming and emotional manipulation as well.
Hmm.
And also, as we talked about media earlier, we need to move out of the whole aspect of romanticizing like these huge age gaps with especially
Hmm.
vulnerable, kind of narratives. How we always see like, oh, the older mentor falls for like the naive student. Like
Hmm.
those are not the only types of situations that happen. It's also one of the reasons why I love the show that we've talked about on previous episodes so much, the show Found, with Shanola Hampton and Mark Paul Gusler, because the nature of their relationship, why it's so twisted and dark, is because he isn't a sexual predator. He did not, physically abuse Shanola Hampton's character while she was captive. He preyed on her intellect, because he figures she is his intellectual equal. So in that kind of way, it twists the story. So he's not, no, he's not a sexual predator. He's still
Hmm.
deranged. He's still deranged, mind you. But it makes it so that we get this kind of counter narrative. And
Hmm.
those are more stories that we need to be seeing. Stop telling the whole romanticized age gaps of, oh, this because this person's younger they're naive, or because this person's older they're innately manipulative and things like that.
Hmm.
We need more balanced stories,
Yeah.
you know
Or in it for the money.
yeah. So yeah, I think we just need to, recognize that healthy love honors growth, it honors autonomy and mutual empowerment. So if you're someone that needs to seek out, or you are, are attracted to people who are younger or older in certain circumstances, always just, take stock in yourself, ask yourself,
Mhm.
some guiding questions about what is making me actually pursue this relationship or
Mm.
pursue this connection. And don't let it just be because it's about lust and, things like that. Really take stock in how this encounter relationship can definitely impact your future, because as we're seeing it play out, it in all sorts of circumstances, it definitely can.
That part. Alrighty. Well, I say that will be a good place to cap this conversation. Well, before I even get into your last words, Tyrell, I just want to shout out our YouTube subscriber. We got our first one, so yay!
Yay. And
So, huh?
no, I said definitely.
Yeah. So shout out to you, whoever you may be. I don't know your name. I'll refer to you as they, just to, not offend or anything, because again, it's parasocial relationships. We don't know each other like that, but we do appreciate you. Thank you so much. I know that we do have other people that listen to the podcast, but you are the first person to actually go ahead and feel that dedication or motivation to subscribe, and we appreciate you, and many more people continue in the process of joining, subscribing on other platforms and all the other great things. So,
Mhm.
welcome, welcome. So, with that being said, we will not be here next week. So, unless some crazy stuff happens and now we have to talk about it, but I do not foresee us having an episode next week at all. Yeah, thank y'all so much. So
Yeah. And if
Tyrell, mhm,
and if you just love us and miss us, re-listen to some of our old episodes. There's a lot that we talk about that,
yes.
that completely is missed, that may go over our heads, things like that. So, make sure to comment and subscribe.
Yes, yes, add those comments. Yes. Oh, and another thing, and if you just want to have more things to listen to and other episodes or things with Tyrell and I having conversations, you can go to my original podcast, which is coming back in due time. My other podcast, which is the Holy Podcast, and I'll have information in the show notes to include our recommendations list of a lot of the shows that we've talked about. Throughout our episodes, our suggested shows and books and other media that you can look at and pull up, as well as a list of, the podcast and all that stuff. So that will be in the show notes for you as well. With that being said, Tyrell, is there anything else that you would like to share before we close, while I close everything out?
Just to raise a hand, reach out to all people who are survivors of of violence and assault. Again, this is our awareness month, but of course, we should always be aware of this all year round, so just take stock in the stories that are shared with you, things that you can do to get involved with your community and volunteer, and just just practice, just continue to practice empathy. No one is expecting to be an expert or a know-all when it comes to these topics, but just listening, with empathy and compassion is always the first step, is always a step forward.
Amen. All right. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to Melanin and Moonlight, your late night space for deep, thought-provoking conversations about sex, culture, and the well-being of the Black community. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep the vibes flowing and your mind open. Bye, y'all.
Bye.